Hello, everyone. We are back. This is part 2 of movie reviews by Dr. B and
Mrs. B.
And I'm an anthropologist, and she is
I'm an independent artist scholar.
There you go. And this is a deeper dive of the movie Polly. And the reason why we're doing a deeper dive of this very important movie during African American history, Black History Month, is that it has, as Mrs. B indicated in part 1, and I know she wanted to talk about even more, I'm going to give her the platform to really go deeper into our discussion on the historical, social, religion, spirituality, cultural, and race relations issues of this movie based in 1955 in Alabama. So, with that said, I'm going just to highlight one of the key phrases that Keshia Knight Pullman said when she got down in this rural town, and she said to her friend, the young man, quote, "Where are all the white folks at?" That's what she said. She said, "Where are all the white folks at?"
Yes,
and
did.
that gave you
Yes,
an indication that this environment, this area, was highly segregated.
Yes, certainly was.
So with that, the lead in, what do you have to say about this classic movie based on this time period?
Well, the lead-in is a very good question. It's a very good topic to speak about today. The question, where are all the white folks at? Well, it was a segregated town. One side of the bridge was white, Caucasian. The other side was African American Black. During this time period, segregated South. And these issues came to pass through racial tension. We spoke about it earlier in the first videotaping and podcast of Polly, the Disney movie film, starring Phylicia Rashad as an actress as Miss Harrington, as well as Keshia Knight Pullman as Polly as well. So she came from the north to the south, and they're playing her parents had passed away. They're playing the glad music in the church and the ministry, and she brought a different kind of living, a different kind of gladness of heart. And she got there and she sat on that stage and she sat on the bridge, the older bridge before they built the new one. Where's white folks? Where's all the white folks at? Well, it was segregated. And coming from the north, even though the north in Detroit, where she came from, when her parents died, was still segregated by divisions and streets. In the south, it's the country roads, the rural areas, the subdivisions. And when she gets down there, where are the people? Where are they? Well, you live in a black town because you could not go to the white churches. You could not go to the white stores. Mm-hmm. You could not go to the areas or even buy a home in the white neighborhoods. You lived on the other side. And even though some areas were integrated, they were not all integrated, mostly in the South. And so there was segregation and racism. And those folks in that town had to work through the racial tension, the racism, the white supremacy, even as we speak in 2021. And it's a topic relevant of African American history and Black History Month, but all year round of all our colors and persons of color.
Very relevant then to today, because
Exactly.
You can see how towns and cities are still very segregated today in 2021. Back then, they didn't have a choice to be in their neighbor. They were forced to. Today, we're not blatantly forced, but it still is there today in 2021. So let's start off with the historical context of this being in 1955 and how this young lady coming from Detroit, coming from the North with different values, different beliefs of interactions, and she's immersed herself in this small rural town in Alabama and has to get adjusted to how these African Americans had to adjust to the discriminatory practices in this rural southern town.
Well, adjusting to well, you never adjust. When you have discrimination, whether it's Jim Crow black codes that they call it there, or they call them black codes now, and after the Reconstruction of the American South, and even prior to that, you live with that if in your historical background. Not just black folks, not just African American, but all people, because it's all our history. And so the psychological part of it, it may have been in chains at one time, but then they become, well-to-do, they groom up, they level up in prosperity.
You mentioned one thing.
But you're never still equal.
You mentioned one thing, the psychological adjustment.
Psychological adjustment.
What do you mean by that? Let's do a deeper dive of that psychological adjustment.
During the time period where you have to live a certain way, you can't participate as a full human being in the society that you built, that your ancestor built.
You can't,
and even through slavery prior to that.
Being.
But this is set in the 1955 setting. So they have thought they have overcome that, but yet they found out in certain circumstances they didn't. And still in 2021, still haven't to a certain extent. More of a digression, but being mindful that we still have to make those corrections and address those issues. The psychological harm, the chains may have come off, and you've gone into the future, and you've addressed how the African American community has risen and continues to rise, equal as anyone else. A person of color is equal as anyone else. The black culture, black people, equal as anyone else.
There you go.
But when you get to a point where you're told that you cannot be equally, equally a person, as well as in your gifts, your education, and then you have to deal with the psychological harm of it. When you're dealing with psychological harm of prejudice and racism in the South, when you have tried your hardest to reach certain levels of education,
there you go,
and business and leadership and presidencies, you still wonder why are you being dealt a situation where you're still not equal, and your only thing dividing you is your skin color. Even the DNA genetics have surpassed all types of stereotypes, but yet culture and ancestry and ancient still remains.
Come with it, Mrs. B. Come. I told you we're going to do a deeper dive. Come with the deep.
and so in the movie Polly, these are all the undertones and overtones that are a part of society to this day. And the actors in the film, the actresses, pull it off magnificently. And they deal with the racial strife, the racial slurs. We will never be a name that you call us that's insulting. We will never be insulted, not even physically.
Let me just say this one part where when they were interacting with one of the...
It's unacceptable. Yeah, racism is unacceptable.
Where they were had to interact with the physician who had to take care of Polly at the end, and he used a discriminatory racial term to describe her, and the African American said, basically, we're not going to accept that term, but we're going to help you along the way to correct your speech, because it's so ingrained in everyone of how the dynamics played out, and there were certain words that were in that time period accepted, but then the individual said, well, we're no longer going to accept those words of how you portray a young African American girl, and we're going to help you. And I really love that part, help you along the way.
Yes, Disney's did a great job in producing various films, including you can purchase Polly at Disney. And this movie, of course, the title, if we haven't mentioned it earlier, is Polly. And you could view all the topics and come up with your own discussions in your own home.
There you go.
In your own homes while you're online, working online.
And also, give us feedback. What was your discussion, your deeper dive of the film, of the historical, religious issues, race relations issues, the cultural issues. Again, going back into African American Southern culture, it's refreshing to see how individuals had to adapt during that time period.
And here's the point here. How can you be Southern hospitality during the time of 1955? And prior to that, we're getting better in geographics and how we treat each other and ethnicities. But how can you be Southern hospitality in 1955 if you are treating other people as less than human? Now, Southern Belle is the same color as anyone else, beautiful inside. And this is why the church was so important, because church and God in Southern and Northern superseded a skin color.
There you go.
And this is why that was important in this particular film and movie. And so did peace. And so part of that, I would say truthfully, that is the way of most civil and human rights and moral justice, that it corrects the parts of our society while being mindful of peaceful religions. And so when he was preaching and they were dealing with the politics of it all, they still had to live in their homes and deal with what strife they had to live with. Regardless of what policy there was, voting rights, any type of school situations, they had to deal with that on a day-to-day basis. And so there are many heroes within many communities that even make a presidency and even make a governor and even make a mayor and community and church leaders and ministers and bishops and clergy. They all had to come together. And these are heroes every day that make us better people and better persons.
Very good. Wow.
So Southern hospitality includes Southern Belle's in your skin color. So we ought to work together, as well as Northern and West and East.
And I love that. And I just love the thank you, Mrs. B.
Oh, you're welcome.
And I just really loved in the movie where the preacher, he was really highlighting the frustration, the anxiety, the discrimination there, but in a way of which kind of consoled everyone, made everyone feel at ease. Because when you go to church, you want to get it all out. You want to get it all. That's a safe haven for many folks. Okay? Yes. And the minister and the preacher eventually let it all out. Because they were all kind of controlled initially, and then they let it out. They let that spirit
and the
move them.
The innocence is also whimsical. The innocence of it, the songs. And then when Phylicia Rashad, Miss Harrington, and she has that love interest, and he comes and he says he's gonna go up to the big city up to Morehouse up in Atlanta, where that's that high class music. Right?
Now you mentioned a very good point. You mentioned that very good point. Phylicia Rashad was love interest was Dorian Harewood. Dorian Harewood was a doctor of music. He was a doctor of music in High Atlanta at the time. High Atlanta. That's a higher at that time high socioeconomic standing versus Phylicia Rashad was back in Atlanta, more of the not as high prestigious. Yes. So Dorian Harewood coming from big time Atlanta, and she was kind of taken back that he was coming back home, and what could he tell her what to do? So there was some social standing there.
Social stratification.
Social stratification between the two, even though they were deeply in love.
They're deeply in love because he was doctor of music. But what kind of music?
Yeah.
You know,
And they actually call
is
him
it classical music?
Yeah.
Is it acceptable to the white culture, to the white society at the time? Is it acceptable to all cultures? How can we perform so we can be just as perfect? But the thing is, Southern Belle, coordinated, well-fashioned as she was, she couldn't even be more perfect because of the skin color. She was somebody all by herself, as Maya Angelou says.
Yeah.
You're somebody all by yourself. And as the poet says, and many other poets. And this is the thing. She was wondering, you know, how much education do I need to be just as equal as a white person, as a Caucasian person? And even though I have multiracial people in my family, even within me, how equal do I need to be? And why should I have to continue to prove myself that I am sitting in that church or sitting in that church as a congregation? I'm God's child. I am just as equal as you. My faith is just as equal. And my body, head to toe, is just as equal. It should not be insulted. My mind should not be disrespected. My knowledge should not be thrown away or disrespected. My voice should not be put down, suppressed and oppressed.
There you go.
You have to rise up.
There you go.
Further. Because we are all equal.
There you go.
Whatever your skin color is. And this is the thing they were addressing. And Polly, the younger child, she had that accent, she fell down in the movie. You have to see that. And how they handled it. But Polly, when she went over to Miss Snow's house, and Miss Snow's on to stay in and close herself in, and I don't want to deal with those. And is the black folks still acting the same way? Well, what do you mean is the black folks still acting the same way? Miss Snow, she went and Polly went up to her house and said, I want to give you a gift basket.
There you go.
Here's the baskets. I want to open up. Why are you acting like this? The innocence of a child, the innocence of a person, and opening hearts. But it was also her own personality.
Yeah.
What type of personality can you have? Do you want? Do you project? And then she went in her house. They got to be friendly. She started combing Miss Celeste's hair.
Yeah.
And she says, well, I look beautiful, child. I look certainly beautiful, in her southern accent. And she looked certainly beautiful. And she started combing her hair. Then she says, I'm going to come on out. And she started talking to the man who was Mr. Pendergrass.
Brock Peters.
Brock Peters, that where the bridge was the issue also. There's layers of issues.
And then they ended up
racial tension.
They ended up bonding at the end. They ended up bonding at the end. Mr. Pendergrass and Mrs. Snow bonded at the end. They became best of friends. So that race relations that was divided severely, they became best of friends.
Yes, they did. Yeah, they did.
And just by spending time with one another, getting to know one's history, circumstances, they came together.
Yes, they did.
That was refreshing to see. And let me just say, of course, I'm going to have to do a little shout out for
that music,
Phylicia,
though, with the Holy Ghost.
The Holy Ghost, but Phylicia Rashad's outfits were fantastic all throughout the movie. And you mentioned how she was really not just controlling, but really very authentic. But she had so much pressure to maintain her status as the one moving. Actually, she took over her father's meal, and kept the money coming in for the African American community.
Yes.
So she knew she had a major responsibility to keep the African American community moving forward, but also incorporate the church, incorporate how individuals behave towards the white culture, white community. So she was going through a lot of strife and challenges herself.
And thinking that not only you have the racial tension, but also the moral tension. You know, you have to be perfect in church too.
There you go.
You're wicked. You're a sinner. Wickedness. And then I got to tell him. I got to got to get on them and chastise these grown folks up here and tell them you're not doing the right thing. Well, how much more perfect can I be? And during this time of coming up towards people are celebrating and practicing religious practices in Lent and all of what you believe, or peaceful meditations, or any type of belief that you live, whether it's Islam, whether it's Christian, whether it's Buddhist, whatever your religion is. Why make it legalistic? Meaning, start following a certain set of values that are man-made and woman-made only, rather than God-made. And so this is the thing that she had, the dilemma. And so she had to go through this. And as we get a deeper dive into this, why do we have to go through this? We know we have to go through these things. And people talking about, repent. And you get through all those things in the church and that restriction. And what should I do? And let's just open up. We are people. We are flawed at times. We don't always do the right thing. People make mistakes. They do things, but they do go on to have an open heart, to mend, to make things correct, to make things right, to come together, to make agreements, to make negotiations, to make compromises. And then you cannot push people away. You can't push us away or push us away by saying you're wrong all the time.
There you go.
When are you going to tell me something happy? That I've done something good?
There you go.
All the time.
There you go.
And that's Detroit glad music that the actress Keshia Knight Pullman was talking about in the glad music, the happy songs. Tell me what I'm doing correct. Tell me what I'm doing fine. Tell me what I'm doing right. Well, tell me what I'm doing wrong in a nice way, in a kind way. But don't control me to what you think it is. Because I have a journey with God's path too. And that's part of the movie too. Now, I don't want to go into any type of preach or anything like that.
I know you can. I know you will. But we're not going that far.
We're not going that far because this is a movie film review discussion, deeper dive. But we're talking about different points of views and why we're all being in acceptance of each other's beliefs respectfully. And in terms of religion and dioceses, in terms of churches, the Black church, the African American church, the Egyptian church as well. And so have some respect for all those churches as well.
Wow. So
and AME and CME.
So there you go. So we can go on and on about the different areas. That, I think,
to stop racism.
Thank you.
To stop white supremacy. To stop hurting skin color. To stop hurting the mind, body, and soul.
Keep going. Keep going.
To love one another.
Keep going.
To come together. To love you. To love us. And this is what this movie also projects. And so, in this serious time of COVID, and people are dying, and some people are saving lives every day, and racism, an insurrection of the U.S. Capitol, the failed attempt of our democracy almost being taken. We are all a part of America. You are all a part of your countries. And you have to stand up for your rights and civil rights and human rights and freedoms. And stand up for each other. Love one another. And for your abolitionists and your freedom fighters. But you're peaceful. Peacefulness coming together. And that's what I want to say.
There you go, Mrs. B. That was the biggest, deeper dive that we could have gone through. And I'm about ready to... I'm sorry, I'm getting ready to cry. but I'm getting ready to cry. You making me all teary-eyed over here. You've gone way too deep on me, but that's good. Thank you. So thank you, everyone, for this part 2 of Polly. I know you didn't expect all of this.
And as they say in Polly,
what they say?
We're not judging anybody, but make a joyful noise.
Make a joyful noise. And keep believing. Keep believing in your faith. Keep believing in yourself.
Culture.
And
Culture.
there you go. And that was, again, I'm Mr. B, Dr. B.
And I'm Mrs. B.
There you go. And I'm an anthropologist.
And I'm an independent artist scholar.
There you go. That was part two of our movie review of Polly, The Deeper Dive.
The Deeper Dive.
The Deeper Dive. It doesn't get any deeper than that, folks. We out.